Hey, it's Michael. Welcome to week 5. We're halfway done. It's pretty amazing, and I'm not sure if you imagined that this class would spend as long as we did in the subjects that we did. So let me just give you kind of an overview. Now, in terms of teaching and learning, they're two different things. Obviously, there's lots of topics going on. You all have different subjects. There's a lot of randomness, but as you might have started to notice, that the way to solve these problems is starting to become a little bit clearer. And if it isn't, that's fine. Learning these things does take practice. So once again, as we go into this week, I hopefully gave you feedback on your assignment that's due at the end of this week. It'll still be the markup that we worked on this week, but I want to spend a little more time building some nuances that I don't know if you've completely thought about, or more likely, is your data ready for this? So, learning number one is we started with just the idea of street signs and how do you get around? How do you find anything, right, in this world? Well, one solution of how we find things is to have very strict databases, right? You found data, and you found in a sense that data is everywhere that you look, all the places you go are filled with these databases, and databases tend to be pretty rational-ish, but they're not always useful, right? If you're ever dealing with these sort of data structures at work, you will most probably find that the adage garbage in, garbage out is pretty common in databases. There's almost very few databases that are used in work environments that are really that reliable and comprehensive. If you've ever used SharePoint, for example, which I do a lot of SharePoint work for different companies, is just even a search in SharePoint will probably not find you much of anything. So things about you wanting to find something and it being able to understand that that's what you need is a really challenging job for an information architect. So this week, or in week 4, we learned one of the skills that's needed and is actually somewhat underappreciated, which is structural hierarchies, right? We're going to call it hierarchies, also translating. You're kind of a translator, right? So you started out with maybe a field name called place name, let's call it that. Maybe your data was about places or something. Well, place name is pretty good, right? I mean, that's a real good descriptor of the thing that you are, that you have. If only somehow you could have people search for that using, search terms, or we'll show later how we manipulate things in order to get people to focus on the elements that they want. But instead, you got to translate it in this weird language that we came up with called HTML, hypertext markup language. It also comes with this idea of a document object model, which we haven't spoke about, but almost the idea that a document itself was given a programmatic language to speak in, and boy, did it work. It's probably the most used language if ever there was one, but it isn't very good at describing things, right? In fact, if you read the divitis thing, which is over here, like almost all HTML is not very descriptive at all. Now, it doesn't mean that it's not useful or doesn't work or doesn't render a page, but most pages aren't viewed as rendered things. They're viewed by other computers, and they take that data, Google being one of the biggest ones, and now AI. AI has taken all of that information and turned it into something searchable. And AI is a big part of this pattern layer that I'm talking about. AI is absolutely better than humans now at seeing patterns. And boy, do we love patterns, you know? In fact, we used to think this was our superpower, but now AI is really quite good at it. And AI can help you this week if you like. AI could probably, and I did it at my end of the video, mark up your data pretty well. It's not great, but it's okay. I was surprised actually. What I'm more interested in is not the doing of the coding or anything. Don't by any means you have not learned HTML. You have learned that this is a controlled vocabulary, a very small vocabulary, as you can see. In fact, you can't even use half of these things. But in the beginning of the web, Having been there, I will tell you most websites were actually marked up with, where is it in here? T is in, it should be in alphabetical order. S T tables. There we go. Table, TD, T-bot. These two terms made up most of the markup of the web because they did it visually. They just made a big table and put stuff in it. Now, even nowadays, they don't really use tables for tables, but that's another complaint. So all I'm really interested in right now is not necessarily about what this looks like. If you're looking at it, you're missing the point. It's these groupings, these words being used semantically to say that these things are more important than the others, especially I would just leave out H1s, but whatever. H2s and H3 is something informs something else, and a header informs what's next to it, just like a chapter heading informs what the chapter's about, right? These headings are important to people to be able to quickly, or let's just say even understand what is going on. So you've all done markup. I've given you all hopefully some feedback. I will do so again this week, but right now it's the words. Certainly, I do want to make sure that you're getting the point right. So let me just share a couple at random, not to pick on anybody, but in fact, I think you all did pretty well at this, and that's good. It's to be expected. I think the only thing I've seen is maybe a lack of what I'm looking for this week, which is some really specific words. If I can go back here, if there is any words down here that more distinctly describe your content, please use them, because there are words in here that do more distinctly describe what it's marking up, and that's a big, big, big plus. If you ever want to get into the SEO game, you've learned the secret. Or the accessibility game, which is also very important. People can't always see websites, so all of this markup counts. You can also look at each other's markup, which is a big part of this course, right? There's not a big need for this to be hyper personalized. In fact, as I said, you all are doing individual work, but you're all kind of solving the same issues. So let me just look at a couple of things. I hope you understand, why do I want a all your fields is that, well, it makes it easier for me. It also makes it a little easier for you that you're translating these very specific words into very generic words, right? You lose the fact that this is a director. So now down here, you might have to make the decision, do I need to say director is? That is actually a big part of this week. I'm really going to be looking to that. If you just say, you basically put director, in a list, director X, see what, if you just list out your fields and put the value there, that's not really what I'm looking for. I really want you to puzzle over this. Is there any better way to do it than to just say, here's my database? Because you could just put a table on this screen and have people go from there. But hopefully you've seen from the examples, like, no, we want to start designing pretty soon, but the data doesn't care what the design is, right? The designer might, because there's different worlds and different use cases and so forth. So we also want to make sure there's some use cases. We talked a couple weeks ago. Is there a use case? Is there something that people can do with your data? We're going to get into all that this week. So yeah, we put in this format and then we go through here. We're using these. Hopefully another thing is, this is a nice job of, I don't want more markup than content, right? If there's way too much markup, and also I'll just say I'm a little against H4s, like an H3 as a field, actually we just said this, doesn't necessarily need another header unless this heads up something else. So it's a bigger part of what I'd like you to be learning, is how important hierarchy is, how a header informs a lot of content underneath it. If you just use headers because they look nice, that's not what they're for. They're actually there to give context. That word again, it's the title of the book that we use, right? Context is everything, and headers provide a lot of context. Uh, in this particular example, I believe, yeah, I mean, in this case, here is a header and a subheader. So if we go to header, it says this is the name of a wine. Header 3 isn't really heading up this other header 3. So again, these are things I will likely just mention, but this is the challenge of using headers. But what about these words, right? Here's the word New Zealand, here's the word medium body. Without any context, these things are somewhat meaningless. So this week, our actual job is to start to figure out more of what we thought about or talked about a couple weeks ago, which is taxonomies. Now, to make it a little bit more approachable, we're going to have two words. I'm going to call them nouns and I'm going to call them verbs. Okay. So this week we're doing nouns. Nouns are things that describe something, which is really what we got to when we first got into this, here's these descriptive attributes, and then we're trying to group things, we're trying to give them hierarchy, and now we want to really understand, like, how do people actually organize this stuff? We looked at movies just a second ago. This is also a good thing if you want to research, you should research what is the taxonomy for movies, right? Now, the thing about taxonomies is they've been around forever. There's a few examples here. If you want a wine, weird wine taxonomy, here is the flavors of wine. Okay. When I say weird, it means that's a little non-typical taxonomy. If you want to look at, here's just beers, right? Like these are taxonomies of how do you tell one beer from the other. And most things that you're going to have taxonomies. If they don't, let me know, because even colors have taxonomies. Um, and people, if you've ever gone to Reddit, might think, like, you can come up with lots of taxonomies. So we've got Linnaeus to thank. He invented the idea. He was able to actually give a taxonomy to all living things, which was really helpful when you tried to talk about something with someone. So you can both have invented and traditional taxonomies for uh, for your content. You can also use things like card sorting, which we're not going to necessarily do in this class, but card sorting is a way to get people to try to help you come up with taxonomies or groupings. So it's all about groupings, taxonomies, headers. This is just to finalize and to make sure that you've got all the stuff needed so that next week we're going to talk about verbs, which is how do you navigate taxonomies. If you have any questions, let me know. Plenty of opportunities to share and to get feedback from me. I hope you understand I'm very committed to making sure that you guys don't waste time going down any blind alleys, but also can stay curious, because there's no right answers to this. And even though the GPTs of this world can do some of the work, a person really does need to understand hierarchies. I don't know necessarily that this is something that a computer can do, because what's more important to the other has a lot to do with your end goal. So we'll find out some more about why I think these are all things that people need to do, even though they might be under the hood and not visible to most. Have a great week. Thanks.